Bet the Board presents Stay Green. Stay Green is your first stop for all the metrics, matchups, and money-making opportunities at the track each race week. This is Stay Green, the NASCAR betting podcast. Here are your hosts, Todd Fuhrman and racing analyst Chris Werme.
Welcome into the Stay Green podcast, part of the Bet the Board podcast network. It's all about making left turns this weekend in Martinsville, Virginia. I'm your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined, as always, by professional NASCAR bettor and racing analyst Chris Werme. And Wormser, from the Sunday night high tire wear of Richmond at 3/4 of a mile to the shortest track in the Cup Series, we head to the paperclip this weekend, my friend. Looking forward to it?
Yeah, I am. I like Martinsville. I think it's nice to have kind of these short tracks early in the season, especially with this new package. It was nice to kind of get things to go our way at Richmond last week, albeit a little stressful there at the end. But ultimately, I like Martinsville. I think it's a good track. I like the beating and banging. I like the fact you get a long run. You can get up to 120, 130 lap run, see who's fast. So hopefully we get some tire fall off. I think without tire fall off, it can get boring at times, but Martinsville has been around NASCAR as long as it's been around. So I like Martinsville.
And we know the importance of this race. We'll come back here in the fall as the penultimate race of the season to take the field of 8 down to the final 4, which will head to Phoenix to race for a championship. For those folks tuning into the Stay Green podcast for the first time, we break things up around these parts. Stage 1, a race recap of what we learned and what we can take away going forward last weekend from Richmond. Stage 2, all about your in-depth dive of the Martinsville race coming up this weekend. And stage 3, a little bit more about general NASCAR betting. This week, a little bit of a unique topic where we'll pick Chris's brain on some of the secondary series across Xfinity and the trucks. But Richmond Worm, we know it grabbed headlines for, I don't know if all the wrong reasons is the right way to try and spin it. You can say what you want. But look, the bottom line is that's NASCAR's decision, how they want to try and officiate the late race restart between Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. has minimal implications unless you had an outright on either of those two drivers and saw your betting card get thrown into complete upheaval. But the overarching question I have for you, was it a good race, or have we kind of jumped the shark with Richmond? We get high tire wear, which is normally great, but at the same time, every car seems to fall off at the exact same pace, and there is no passing whatsoever in some of these long green flag runs, and it boils down to more strategy than anything else. Trying to be the first to pit road or deciding you're going to try and stretch a fuel run as long as your tires will hold on.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head that it comes down to get what you can on a restart. I think you have to have a good short run car to win in this short track package. But then the fun part of the strategy is when, Chris Bell decided to stay out at the second to last stop, unfortunately speeding, which ended his day. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if Chris Bell doesn't go out there and speed, he takes the white flag before Bubba causes this last caution, and we're not even talking about this. I feel like he's got a 5-second lead with 2 laps to go, and so we don't even talk about this. So let me just put that as my disclaimer.
Well, that's fine, but look, we've said it time and time again. It's about not making mistakes, and Christopher Bell's mistakes weren't just on race day. He had to start 29th and work his way up through the field, and when all these cars have such narrow levels of separation, it's tough to make up that kind of ground, and if you're going to do so, even with a hot rod out there in the track, you have no margin for error. No margin whatsoever to race from 29th inside the top 10 and have to make sure your pit stops are pristine.
Perfect.
And you're able to pick off spots at restarts and on pit road under green flag stops.
But I do find it fascinating that it seems to be the 20 and the 11 that decide to stay out longer and kind of basically what they're trying to do is not lose as much ground to the field on the back end of their run. So that way, when they get fresh tires, they are exponentially better than the guys that fall off more. So I think but it also, you need clean track in order to do it. It's almost kind of like you look at it like an IndyCar stint where it's like, hey, if we pit early, or a Formula One race where you pit early and you undercut and you can go out there and you have clean track for a few laps, that actually makes sense to do the undercut. But if you're in clean air and you can run another 6, 7, 8 laps, then go pit and take your tires, if you're not losing as much ground relative to the field on those later laps on your tires, it actually makes sense to stay out a little bit and then actually dig and be the aggressor when we come to the checkered flag. I actually do find that fascinating, whether it works or doesn't work. We saw Denny Hamlin, when it happened to him, he ran into Logano. Logano kind of took off. I mean, he definitely closed the gap to Truex. Truex was also in lap traffic, which is also becoming super hard. You start lapping up to 18th place, and the difference between the 18th place car and the race leader is almost nothing in this car, and they can aero block, and everyone's kind of falling off the same way. It becomes very difficult for the leader to kind of carve his way through traffic. So it was an interesting race. I wish, Truex kind of deserved to win, and he caught a lot of shit for the way that he acted after the race. But the day
that was
pure
frustration for Martin Truex Jr.
But the day that Martin Truex just says, that's racing, is a day he probably should retire. Because I actually like seeing that out of Marty. I mean, he's going down there, he's like dooring Kyle Larson, which is like, okay, really? You're mad at Kyle Larson for what's happened? But I kind of like seeing that fire out of Truex. But the day that fire goes out and he just kind of says, well, whatever, is the day he probably should hang it up. So,
I mean, look, Larson's demeanor was hysterical. He's laughing, knowing that he more or less gets spun and somehow picks up track position.
Yeah.
In that particular late race exchange with Bubba Wallace, he understands that Martin Truex is frustrated. And then apparently there was video footage of an interaction between Martin Truex Jr. and Joe Gibbs as well that, the Fox broadcast talked a little bit about on Kevin Harvick's pod. So I think it's always interesting to see that level of fire and know that Martin Truex Jr. is still out there racing, not just for points, but wants to win races. So I'll leave the final word to you on Richmond. Anything that you think we saw there that's truly applicable going forward that you saw that really stuck out? Or is it the same general takeaway that we have nearly every race since the super speedways? Hey, look, it's HMS and JGR. They're a cut above everybody else in the Cup Series right now.
Yeah, I actually, you put on here this note that I did not see. I never really kind of go through the recap stuff when it comes to, what we talk about in this podcast. I want that to be just kind of just off the cuff. I didn't realize you posted, and I just tweeted this. I swear I did not see this. You said time for NASCAR to change the tire compound or bring Richmond down to just one race date. This is what I tweeted, having not seen this earlier today. This is a quote from Greg Stucker from Goodyear Racing that I tweeted out. After running at Phoenix and Richmond, teams now have several races with this thicker gauge, which has produced some good racing. I said, some good racing? Phoenix is about to lose the championship race, and Richmond could lose a race date. It's just crazy that everyone's talking about it, and Goodyear's just up there going, oh yeah, they had good races. What the hell are you watching? Like these two tracks, I'm not saying Phoenix is a great track. I still think Richmond has it. There's still the fall off there. We've seen a little bit wider groove on hot, slick days. If I am the president of Richmond Raceway, I am blaming Goodyear tires for this. I would just say, hey, listen, it's hard for us to put on a good show with this tire you have. It's crazy. I didn't see you type that, and I just was reading it right now. And I tweeted that earlier. I think that these two tracks are losing kind of credibility in the sport because of Goodyear.
I mean, look, the sport needs to go out there and put on the best racing product it possibly can. And if it means reducing some of these tracks to one date, so be it. As they talk about revitalizing some of the tracks of yesteryear, and there's some different venues, whether it's international locales or anything else. So something to keep in mind on when the 2025 schedule gets unveiled, not coming anytime soon, but we'll see what kind of tweaks and adjustments are made there. Wave the green, white checkered flag on stage one. You can follow Chris on X at Chris Werme15. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. As always, most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And for those folks out there, plenty of great college basketball content to get you prepared for the upcoming Final Four this Saturday from Phoenix. And lo and behold, a little Masters preview that we'll have on the Bet the Board channel dropping at some point next week. I know golf near and dear to you, Wormser. So I'm sure you will be tuning in to that as well. But when we look at stage two and we head to Martinsville, as far as track specifics are concerned, look, I mentioned at the top, it's the shortest track that we'll go to all season long, 0.526 miles in length, affectionately referred to as the paperclip because of its unique shape, small size, tight corners, described most often as such. When you look at Martinsville, it has been an iconic track, as you mentioned, known for its pink hot dogs as well. I've never eaten one myself. I've only heard mixed reviews on said culinary delicacy. But when we look at Martinsville in terms of track comps, what is the baseline that you're looking at other than the 2 times we head to Martinsville on an annual basis?
I actually put the Clash question mark. I think that this is you're heavy on the brakes.
It would explain why Ty Gibbs had been bet down already, although pre-week Ty Gibbs takes money every single week so far this year.
Yeah, I would say the Clash is probably most comparable. However, I have open on my little fantasy racing cheat sheet. I have all 4 of the Richmond races that we've had in the next gen car. I also have the Phoenix and Richmond race opened combined. And then I have the race results from the Martinsville race last year, the Phoenix race this year, and then the Richmond race this year. So as much as there's not, I would say, a specific track comp that would rival the Clash, I do think you kind of have to take in all this information and try to distill it down to what you think will be useful. And that's kind of where I have it narrowed down to. Even though I don't think there's a direct comp, I do think that this short track package does have some drivers that have probably been better than others.
That's a very fair assessment. And I think when you mention drivers that have been better than others, we see a couple of distinct tiers forming heading into this weekend's race as far as odds makers are concerned. As always, do shop around. We've tried to amalgamate some of our composite odds here, looking for a consensus above all else. So we can start with the favorite pretty much every sports book you look at, Chris, and that, of course, is Denny Hamlin. Prices less than 5-1 almost everywhere. You look at his average finish over the last 5 races of 7th. 2 wins are his only top 5 finishes so far this season, but he is the only driver to lead a lap in every race this season. And we look at next gen at Martinsville, an average finish at 10th, but he finished 28th in one race, distorts some of those numbers there when you consider he's got 3 straight top 5s here, but no wins to his resume. Ranks 3rd in speed ranking, 2nd in driver rating. Look, anytime you go to a track in Virginia, we know that the local boy Denny Hamlin is going to be a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, to your point that, he has that 28th place finish. If you look at the other 3 finishes, it's 6th, 4th, and 3rd. To your point also that you need to shop around prices, do not bet Denny Hamlin at MGM. He's plus 250 there. Typically, that's really short.
You can't really get a big bet there anyway, so it's a kind of a moot point, all things being.
Yeah. You could bet you could probably bet, I don't know, $10 to win 25 if you really tried to get down there. But definitely shop around. Here's the thing with Denny. Not only can Denny be the best car and go out there and win a race, we saw him just last week take maybe a 4th or 5th place car and win. Do we officially call his pit crew a weapon?
I mean, given the pit stops we've seen, when you're beating everybody else off pit road by a full second during the money stop, that's more than a weapon. That's walking into a rock fight with a bazooka in your back pocket.
Yeah, in last year, and I think up until just recently, we have definitely given Denny a hard time, or his pit crew, just that 11 team in general, whether it was speeding on pit road or slow stops or loose wheels. Well, they've figured it out. And you give this guy who just, gosh, I feel like he wants to win more than other people. Does it seem like that? I just feel like Denny loves the booze. He loves being kind of the villain. And he's kind of, he just really he just wins. Denny's a winner. I posted
Yep.
Denny cashes tickets. However, I don't like the 4.5 to 1 price. That being said, I do
So a
think that
long-winded way of saying no, he's not going to make your dance card in terms of a pre-week option. So thanks for wasting 5 minutes
yeah,
of our lives, Worm.
but I still think you see. I think there were some guys that definitely bet him at 7 to 1 after seeing him look average, probably at Richmond in practice. Maybe a 5th or 6th place car. But just saying, hey, it's Denny at Richmond. He finds a way. Well, he sure as shit did that. And
Yep.
so there's an element of, Denny finds a way to get it done, almost like the Scotty Scheffler of golf. Just he might not be there on Friday and Saturday, but he's going to start posting some low numbers late in the round, and he can potentially get it done. And I think that's why he's priced that way. Is not only does he need he doesn't need the best car to win. He still figures out a way to get it done.
When we talk short flat tracks, we always have to talk about it being a Marty party. Martin Truex Jr., 7-1-ish thereabouts, leads the regular season point standings, despite how that Richmond race came to an end. When you back out the super speedways, he's got 5 straight top 10s on his resume. His average finish during that stretch is 6th. He's now led laps in 5 straight races and has led 17% of laps in the Cup Series so far this season. As far as his overall metrics in terms of next-gen cars at Martinsville, an average finish here of just 14.3. One finish inside the top 10 was a 3rd last spring, but he's shown very good speed in the fall, just struggled for part of the race and wasn't really able to recover. Doesn't rank top 10 in average finish, running position, or driver rating here. So a tougher guy to try and handicap because the Martinsville history and 4 next-gen races doesn't necessarily support this price, but his current form sure as hell does.
Yeah, and to add to your current form, if you look at Phoenix and Richmond, where we've used this package recently, his average finish is 5.5. And that was kind of an unlucky 5.5 at Phoenix. I think you could go either way on that. Some people say he got lucky that it stayed green. Other people would say that, that's impressive that he was able to drive back up through the field there at Phoenix. Definitely should have won the race last week. I mean, he had to have been seconds away from taking the green or the white flag. I kind of like Marty this weekend, and what we saw is odds makers are not afraid to make him that 4.5 to 1 favorite.
Yep.
So if you do think that Martin Truex Jr. is going to look good in practice and qualifying, which obviously he put it here on the poll last year in the fall, odds makers respect him, and I think they probably should. So I don't hate this price, this short of a price on Marty. The only thing is he just hasn't raced well at this track. I think he's raced a little better at Richmond as of late than he has here at Martinsville. He's also had his struggles, and whenever he loses track position, he tends to lose his mind a little, which we did see towards the end of Richmond as well. But I don't hate Martin Truex Jr. this week because I do think he will qualify well, and he'll probably look good in practice as well.
Ryan Blaney, a price tag is 7-1. We talked about Blaney kind of being the hottest driver out of the gates. That hot start has subsided of late, 3 straight finishes at 12th or worse, and wasn't really on our screen at all Sunday night at Richmond. When you look at how Ryan Blaney has performed, though, at Martinsville, he has been outstanding. The best average finish in the Cup Series during the next-gen era, inside the top 4. He's got 3 top 5s on his resume. Worst finish in 4 races here was 7th. Best driver rating, best average running position. I mean, the most impressive part of all of those accomplishments, Worm, is that he's only started inside the top 10 here once, so he can work his way through the field, which isn't always something that we say about Ryan Blaney when he gets shuffled to the back.
Yeah, this track's been good to him, and it's been good to Ford, I think, in general. If you look at Martinsville last year in the fall, dominant. I think there was no question who the best car was heading into Phoenix after Martinsville last year. But then you look at Phoenix last year, and he was really, really strong. Then you look at Phoenix this year. Yes, he did get a top 5 finish, but it wasn't, for lack of a better term, wasn't the flex that he put on the field in past years at Phoenix. And I think he just kind of took his time and was never really a threat to win this race. I mean, then you go to Richmond, where he has admittedly struggled, and they didn't even talk about him at all on the race on Sunday.
They had no reason to.
I think if you like Blaney, because of his poor qualifying here, I do think it's okay to probably wait on this price. If you look at his his average starting spot Here, let me find it. Where is Werme? Average starting spot in the 4 races here at Richmond at Martinsville is 14.5.
Yeah,
Average finish is
not great.
3.8.
Yep.
But that average start, I think it's got to get better before you go in and jump on a price at 7-1. If Blaney looks strong, let's say he looks as strong as he did last year in the fall, you can wait and maybe he goes off at 5 or 6-1, but at least he has a great car. I don't see him going off at like plus 350 or 4-1. So at 7-1, I feel like it's a little bit short. I would rather wait till practice and qualifying.
Kyle Larson, 8-1, second podium finish of the season, despite the late spin at Richmond, third top 5 of the campaign. Led 144 laps, second only to Martin Truex Jr. When we look at the next-gen era at Martinsville, for Kyle Larson, an average finish here of 7th, tied with Briscoe for third best in the series. 3 finishes, 6th or better, and an outlier of 17th with a win to his credit. Top 3 driver rating, top 3 running position. Kyle Larson at Martinsville, always a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I just wish his price was more like that 11 or 12-1 range, just because I feel like you could steal a little bit of value if he does qualify well. An average starting of 8.3 in the next gen car here, but his average finish is 7th. It's not like he's just blowing up through the field. This is not a Kyle Larson type track. He typically can fire off really quickly, but he tends to struggle to hold on. And it's not like you can go searching here like you can at other tracks. This isn't, a 5-lane track where you just got to find speed. I mean, everyone's pretty much glued to the bottom, and the guys that are the fastest are able to just roll the center and get a straight launch off. So although I do think that he's been a little bit better on these short flat tracks, I thought that he was pretty good at Richmond. But here's the thing, certain drivers that lose track position on these short flat tracks aren't able to work their way up back through the field. Once Larson lost his track position with the caution that everyone's talking about with Kyle Busch, he was never able to get back to the lead. Even when he got the lead after a caution, Truex just took it right back from him. So that's usually a sign that the car's just not quite as good as some other ones. So I'm going to wait on this 8-1 price. It's going to be hard to take Larson under 12-1, in my opinion here. I know he's won in the past, but kind of boneheaded decisions by crew chiefs in order for him to win. And it kind of fell into his lap. Now, he could pull a William Byron and just kind of ride around in 5th all day, 6th, 7th, 8th, not make a mistake and find himself, in the first 2 rows of final restart. Yeah, but I don't think that he's had the speed in his race car at a place like Martinsville, like we've seen at other tracks for him.
Final tier 1 driver that I think we have to bring up, part of the JGR stable, would of course be Christopher Bell. Started deep in the field. You mentioned at the top of the show at Richmond, made one mistake, wasn't able to overcome that and truly contend for a win. When we look at Martinsville and how Bell has performed there, an average finish of 11th here, 2 finishes of 16th or worse, both coming in the spring, 2 finishes of 7th or better. As we know, pressure bursts pipes, and Chris Bell has been immune to that. The higher the stakes, the better he seems to race. 7th best average finish overall, but he has been outside the top 10 for average running position and driver rating when we talk about Martinsville.
Yeah. Gosh, Chris Bell, you could make the argument that he's been the fastest driver on quite a few tracks this year. I would say 3 races, and I'm throwing out the super speedways. You could make an argument for Coda. You could make, obviously, at Phoenix. I don't think there was anyone. I don't even know who the second best car was at Phoenix. Maybe Reddick. And you could say that at Richmond, he was the best car. I think with his strategy, if he doesn't speed, I think he wins that race. I guess we'll never know, but you could certainly make that argument. And I thought he was really good in practice as well. However, Martinsville's just a little bit different. And I know he does have a win here when he needed to, but it was kind of a no-brainer 4-tire call for Adam Stevens. In order for him to win the race, he needed a scenario to play out the way it did, and now he was able to cash the ticket, so I have to respect him for it. But Martinsville, this is just one of those places where it doesn't just agree with some guys, and there's other guys that it does tend to agree with, a guy like Blaney and a guy like Hamlin or Truex. Both of those, or all of those guys, this track just tends to agree with. I would not put Chris Bell in that category yet, but if he does practice well, I certainly would throw him in that category. And I'm not afraid to fire Chris Bell at 5-1 these days, because he works his way through the field and he's there at the end, which is important when it comes to when you're betting outrights.
When we get into tier 2 drivers, I think this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting than some of the top heavy drivers that we discussed in great detail there. So we look at William Byron, 12-1-ish, Joey Logano, 12-1, although I have seen him in a prominent shop as low as 8-1. Brad K anywhere from low at 12, upwards of 16. Ty Gibbs, a fan favorite again. Some books have him as low as 10-1, other books in the teens. And Chase Elliott, he's been on the drift out, and you can understand why, because the 9 car hasn't necessarily shown race-winning speed. But, when we look at William Byron, next-gen Martinsville, uneven finishes. One here in the spring, followed that up 7th in the fall, but 13th or worse in the 2 races last season. And he's been arguably an 8th to 10th place car over the subtotal in Martinsville. We look at Joey Logano in terms of next-gen in Martinsville, very similar finishes to his teammate in Ryan Blaney, still searching for his first win here, but back-to-back second-place finishes in spring races, second-best average finish, 6th in average speed, 7th driver rating, 6th in running position. Brad K, the finishes haven't been there, but a lot of the other metrics suggest that he's been rather unlucky in that particular regard. Ty Gibbs, we may as well throw out a lot of the track history here, and this is going to be a broken record for the 54 car all season. And then Chase Elliott, maybe picking up a little bit of momentum. His best finish of the season came last weekend at Richmond. It was the first time he had a top 5 since the second race at Daytona last year. And when we look at the next gen era at Martinsville, qualified 14th and 24 last year, but ended a run of 5 straight starts inside the top 10. He has been 7th in speed ranking, 10th in average finish, 6th in driver rating, 5th in average running position. So when we look at this tier 2 group of drivers, if there's one or two that you wanted to highlight more than others, the floor is yours.
Well, let's start with Ty Gibbs. Man, is he just a bettor's favorite? It doesn't matter where he opens.
He's
gets
getting bet
down.
everywhere. Yep.
And it's pretty consistent week in and week out. Now this week, I do understand, because if you would consider the Clash the closest comp track, which I would agree with, but I wouldn't put as much weight on it. That was a long time ago. These teams have learned a ton. The thing is that car was really strong at the Clash to get out to almost a 3-second lead in a quarter-mile track. That shouldn't go unnoticed. So I do understand that. However, we've seen him look really strong in practice. I think a few times he's been, a top 3 car, and we just haven't seen him go out there and, I guess, take away the lead and go out there and lead laps. I could be missing something, but I'm fairly certain that he practices well, but he just doesn't push it. Doesn't do the things that Denny Hamlin does to get out there and get the lead in order to win. I actually like that out of Ty Gibbs. He's getting solid finishes. He's competing up there in the top 10 week in and week out. But at 14-1, or these short prices of 8-1 or 10-1, that's too short for him, especially at a place like Martinsville. Brad K, man, he's just a guy that RFK camp just in general hasn't qualified well this year, and they haven't had race winning speed, but they've just gotten a ton out of their car. I think what you said, he has a high floor and a low ceiling. Like, I feel like Brad Keselowski, that's a great comment, by the way. He's going to finish between 6th and 12th and never be a threat to win, but just kind of run a good, clean race. However, Brad's in the camp where if he unloads fast and he looks good and he likes his car, he says he's got something capable of winning, you can bet your ass I'll play Brad K at 8-1 for sure. I trust him. He's a great driver. He's one of those things where you could look at practice times and you could look at all driver comments and say, yeah, I know he wasn't that good, but he's probably going to run in the top 10. I actually do like Joey Logano, and he wasn't great at Phoenix, but there's a chance they found something at Richmond. That was an impressive run out of him. And
he needed it too from a confidence standpoint, given how well he's run at Richmond in the past. So it was one of those things. Okay, Joey ran well at a track where he's run well in the past, leads you to be optimistic about maybe the direction they're heading in.
Yeah, I think that whatever they're doing worked at Richmond. Does it transfer directly to Martinsville? I'm not sure, but he's a guy that this is a track made for him, where you can kind of beat and bang. When you have to pass someone, you just kind of let them know lightly on the bumper. He just lets them know very hard one time on the bumper and then just blows by him. So what I don't know is what odds makers will think of him if he looks good in practice and qualifying. Do we see him go off at 6 or 7-1? I don't know that we're quite there yet with some of these these Fords particularly, just because I haven't run that well. But Richmond last week, we saw it out of multiple Fords that I thought raced much better than they did at Phoenix. So I like Joey this week. If someone said that they thought that the best bet on the board was Joey Logano at 12-1, I would have to agree with them. I think that, he could run top 3 if he qualifies well. I think he can go out there and lead a lot of laps as well.
Now, I'm not going to lie. I found myself rooting against the 22 last week at Richmond, knowing that you and I had passed up to 30-1 when the price drifted out pre-week. Would have been kicking myself if he ends up winning that race. No, he went off more in that 16 to 18-1 range or thereabouts. So the gambling gods can smile kindly upon us in unique fashions, and that was a perfect illustration on the holiday that Joey Logano did not grab the checkered flag for our peace of mind. As we get into tier 3 and we look at some of the longer shots, we'll call this the SHR tier for lack of a better reference point.
SHR tier.
I mean, Josh Berry, short flat tracks have been his strength along with the rest of the SHR team. Chase Briscoe getting a ton of buzz this week, and you can understand why when you consider that he's had a ton of success in the next gen era at Martinsville. An average finish here of 6.8, 4 straight top 10, stage points at 5 out of the last 6. 5th in total speed, 3rd in average finish behind only Team Penske, 4th in driver rating, and he did so last year with a 126 in the spring and 113 in the fall. The average running position there as well. When we look at SHR in general, and then we can throw the rest of the drivers in there around 30-1, whether it be Chris Buescher, Tyler Reddick, Ross Chastain, Alex Bowman, or of course, Bubba Wallace from 2311.
Yeah, Josh was exceptional last week. We gave him out as the best bet over Briscoe. That was kind of just a rocking chair. I think that the rain tires definitely helped him. A lot of people were that started and thought that they had race winning cars. They were starting kind of in the top 10, where Josh Berry's out there starting 30th. Like, I got to get it. So he was able to push his car. I think that the rain tires had a lot more grip than a lot of people anticipated. So he made up a ton of ground early, an impressive run. Really bummed. I didn't give out Josh Berry. I just other than that matchup, my dad took that as to go bet him top 10. And after that last caution, he finished 11th. Oh man.
I was going to say, so your dad shared a common affliction of, one-time host of this fine program, Derek Yoder, who was not thrilled about the way that thing was resolved.
Yeah, exactly. So, Josh Berry, I don't know that he warrants a 20-1 price. I know he's won here in the Xfinity Series, short track guy. The one thing he does have going for him is SHR does actually have a pretty good track record here with this car at this track. And, we've seen good runs out of Priest. We've seen lead laps. Priest led laps. We've seen Briscoe lead laps. And Briscoe's phenomenal here. I think I like him more to finish in the top 10 than I do at this 25-1 price. I just don't think he has kind of that race winning stuff yet. And I think the same goes for Josh Berry. He had as good a car as he's going to get, I think, this year at Richmond, and he wasn't able to get the lead even. So although I do like these guys, I think there's some value on them to win. I don't know if they can actually win. I think you can maybe find some auxiliary stuff, whether it's matchups, top 3s, top 5s. I think that's a better bet in my opinion. But SHR in general, you could throw Ryan Priest in here too. I mean, I've seen as high as 66-1 in some places. Again, I don't think he's going to win, but if his matchup prices kind of match his outright price, there could be some value, because you'd probably mix him in with, a Noah Gragson or even a Kyle Busch. Like, oh gosh,
you can have as much Kyle Busch as you want at 40-1. I mean, there's a reason that the 8 cars number has drifted out, and he hasn't been anything better than an 18th to 20th place car lately. I mean, that team feels like they're going to need a jolt of fresh air, a shot of life one way or another, because they are missing the mark pretty much everywhere right now.
It's brutal. I don't even know what to say. I commented on someone's, do you think that so Austin Dillon's getting a new crew chief, and someone said, do you think this will help or hurt him? It's like, well, it can't hurt him. He's running 28th, and by the way, the difference between, let's just say it doesn't work out, because someone then commented, oh, it could get way worse. Like, well, how much worse? He's going to miss the playoff and finish 35th in points, or he's going to miss the playoff and be 28th in points. I think it only helps. Like, go out there and do something different. But the RCR, this has to be frustrating for Kyle Busch. And by the way, Kyle Busch is not a patient human being.
No,
He likes to
not
get
at
to
all.
the front as quickly as possible. Man, just seeing that price, I would have. We used to bet him like 6-1 at Martinsville, like happy we didn't have to take plus 450, and now he's 30 to 40 to 1. That's just, yeah. I hope he wins a race this year because I think we could get paid if he ever looks good. But the problem is when he won last year, it was a race where they didn't have practice when we were in LA at Fontana, and then it was a super speedway. And then he pulled it and led almost every lap at Gateway. So really no chance to bet this guy. I hope he looks good eventually because he's he's a guy where if he does unload fast and qualifies, let's just say top 5, I do not see that happening. Getting Kyle Busch at 12 to 1 here when he is strong, that's a gift.
Yeah, Kyle Busch somehow unloads fast here, it'll be a massive shock. I mean, their short track program has been a disaster. Other than New Hampshire last year where he finished inside the top 5. I mean, other than that, it's been a little bit of a circus. And when Kyle isn't running well at tracks where Kyle has traditionally been great, Richmond being one, Bristol being another, I'm not sure that there is suddenly a secret formula that they're going to land on at Martinsville. And we'll know that pretty early on when the elite cars are passing Kyle on the outside and don't even have to go to the inside to try and get past the 8. So interesting to try and see some of these numbers that are there, and we'll see who practices well, of that competitive group, because there are a lot of drivers that do come from a pedigree that have the capabilities to win races that are priced at 30 to 1 or greater. And you see some of that reflected in their current matchup pricing that's out there. You can follow Chris on X at Chris Werme 15. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. Follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And Worm, real quick on stage 3, had somebody ask a question about handicapping some of the other NASCAR series, that being the trucks and the Xfinity. You and I don't do a ton with those two unless something really stands out for different reasons than most of the folks that are out there. No reason to try and get into some of those specifics there, but you do watch the races. I know you look to try and bet some of those live. I mean, are there some major takeaways or trends that you've noticed in either of those two series? And more importantly, do you handicap them a lot differently than you do the Cup Series, knowing that there is an increased level of volatility that you get from the tailgaters and that wide range of experience when you have 16-year-olds on the track with guys inching towards their 50s?
Well, there's a lot of differences actually. And if limits were higher, I think we both would spend more time handicapping them, and for good reason.
Challenge to get down, that's for sure.
Yeah, if you're, I would say the biggest thing, if you're just betting a random matchup in the Truck Series or the Xfinity Series, it's very different than the Cup Series. If I play a matchup, I feel more comfortable. If I'd have to say, I feel comfortable if the driver that I bet on is winning by 7 spots, because in the Cup Series, there's 20 guys that could win consistently week in and week out. Let's just say, that's not the argument. Let's just say that there is 20. I think that that's probably pretty fair. When you get to the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series, that number is a lot smaller. And so
6.
Yeah, sometimes when you're betting these matchups, it's hard. Sometimes it's easier to lay a price because you think that these guys are going to finish 25th that you fade and your guy's running 8th. But what happens is there's a lot of mistakes that are made between 7th place and then the 20th place where you feel like there's a big buffer. And so sometimes when you bet these matchups, you have to be comfortable knowing that your drivers might be running side by side the entire day. You just hope over the long run that your driver is going to be better. So if you're betting, Sammy Smith versus Sam Mayer, they might only be 3 or 4 spots all different all day. But that still could be a winning bet and the right bet. Very rarely in the Cup Series am I betting a matchup where I'm like, well, I think he's 2 spots better than him. Like, that's just not a thing. But in the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series, that might be a large edge. The other thing is the late race variance. This is, if you don't watch the Xfinity Series or the Truck Series, basically take Richmond's finish, multiply it by 10, and then have that happen for the last 40 laps of a race. That would be the end of what sometimes these trucks and Xfinity races are. That being said, I think it's really important more than anything because you do have more drivers sliding in and out of the series, and sometimes there's a cup driver in trucks and or a cup driver in Xfinity or a rookie like we saw a couple weeks ago, Connor Zilich, a very talented road course racer in the truck series, hops in a really competitive truck. No one's ever heard of this guy. He opens at 200-1 and then quickly gets bets down. He pulls it. Super young kid. And then acted like a super young kid. I mean, literally overshot turn one.
He was a little excited. He was all amped up on Mountain Dew and Jolt Cola.
So it's fun. It's entertaining. I think you can learn from watching those series as to the flow of the race and how that could transfer to the Cup Series. But it is very difficult to get bets in. And sometimes, if you have practice and qualifying on, let's just say, Saturday morning for the Xfinity series, and then there's only an hour off in between the race going green or 2 hours, sometimes odds makers don't even get a chance to repost. So just understand that, make sure you have a very solid understanding of what the weekend will look like from a time standpoint, because if you're going to make your bets or if you don't make your bets, you plan on waiting till after practice and qualifying, some places just don't repost, especially when you have the Final Four going on or during when football opens. All of a sudden, these sports books are looking at other things. So I do enjoy it, and there are spots. I think the last couple of weeks I've been able to get some crumbs down on some matchups, but ultimately very different than the Cup Series.
Yep, there are definitely some unique names that'll show up on the board. You can see late posting when it comes to fields not being announced, and you mentioned some unfamiliar names. You're seeing a driver already take some money this weekend in Martinsville in the Xfinity Series, and Carson Kvapel, who I'm butchering his last name, but you look around, you go, oh, I hope somebody's going to be mispriced. Books are a little bit more in tune than what they used to be before, where you and I would scramble to bet the field when a Cup driver got added late, knowing full well that we were going to have our accounts ripped from our clutches if that driver ended up going on to win the race. But that is something of yesteryear.
We had to figure out how much we could get down to figure if it was worth losing the account. Yep. It's like, if we can get enough down on this, we'll go ahead and blow this account up. But if it's only, you go and get a couple $100 down, well, you know what? I think over the long run, it's probably better to have this account than take a cheap shot. So, and we've seen, Caesars has had some crazy long odds on some of these openers in these lower series. So, congrats to the guys that have hit some bombs for sure. But hey, before we go to the best bet, can we do some story time?
Sure. If you want to tell a story, knock yourself out, go for it, get it off your chest. It's a safe space around here. At least most of the time.
So a couple of years ago, I tweeted, I think 3 years ago, I tweeted that every year that I watch the opening ceremonies for the Indy 500, I always tell myself, why in the hell have I not gone to this race? So I was talking to a friend about this who's also into NASCAR and the betting side of things. And he said, well, why don't we go? And so this was 2 years ago. I decided that I wanted to go to the Indy 500. So we booked flights, tickets, everything to go to the Indy 500 just because I wanted to go see it. It was something that, on the bucket list. Well, then I kind of got involved with NASCAR, and this was kind of about the time we started the Stay Green podcast, and I was working with NASCAR a little bit as to, where I might fit in the content space when it comes to NASCAR betting. And I met a guy named Matt Stolnicht, and I had said to him that, one of my goals would be to have my brother represented on a Cup car Memorial Day weekend when they kind of salute fallen soldiers. Now, my brother did not die in battle. He died by suicide, 6 or 7 months after he had kind of ended his career in the military. And at that point, NASCAR was only honoring, and I think they only honor, and this is not a dig on them at all. It's just to kind of get the point across that they only honor fallen soldiers that died in battle. And so it wasn't going to be possible for my brother to be on a Cup car, but they made an exception. They threw him on the pace car. And when they honor the family, they fly you, or they don't fly you down. You have to pay, but they offer you tickets, and you have pit passes, and you have all of this for everyone kind of in your family that is interested in going. And sure enough, Matt pulled through, and he was able to get my brother on the pace car. Well, I had already had tickets to the Indy 500, and obviously that's the same day. And my friend that I was going to the Indy 500, pretty successful guy, said, "You know what? You're not missing that." So we booked a jet. He booked a private jet so we would go straight to the private airport there in Indianapolis, and that way we could get to the Coke 600. I could go see the car, take pictures, meet my family who were there to see the car and see them honor my brother. Well, at this point in time, I had still never met Derek Yoder. We were still just Twitter friends. And for those of you that gamble on Twitter, everyone has a friend or two that they've just never met. And I was going to meet Derek at the Coke 600. However, we get on the runway on our private jet, and apparently the error light came on, and whatever, we couldn't take off. And I
would have
was,
just thrown some duct tape on it and said, "Let's go."
I said, "Are you?" Tell the pilot, like, "Are you sure? Like, you sure you can't have?" I said, "Well, it's the door." I'm like, "Okay."
I mean,
We
look,
do need that.
Southwest planes are flying all over the country.
Yeah,
without
that's
doors
true.
now.
Boeing
So,
issue.
look, you
It
could
was a
have been a
Boeing plane.
trendsetter.
So I actually did not make the start of the race. Well, what was happening is my mom wanted a picture with the car, and security was not allowing my mom to get a picture. And I was kind of texting Derek, and Derek doesn't even know who I am at this point. We're just friends on Twitter. And he connects with my mom and basically pushes security out of the way and says, "Hey, her son's name is on the pace car. She is going to get a picture." And my mom was able to go get a picture along with my stepmom and my dad. We're able to get pictures with the pace car. And I missed the start of the race. However, we did eventually find another plane. We got there with, 150 laps to go. Well, the reason I'm telling this story is, and by the way, that was probably the last time like a tear fell down my face, and not because I was missing out on something. When the plane, you're on a private jet and you're like, "Oh my gosh, am I really going to be upset about something like this?" But so many people went out of their way in the NASCAR world, Matt, to get, my name at least on the car, my brother's name on the car. And then for Derek to kind of push security guards out of the way. And, it was just kind of a cool weekend. Well, the other day I received a package, and it was my first die cast. And Derek had sent it to me. And it was a die cast of the pace car with my brother's name on it for the Coke 600 for 2 years ago. So just a cool thing that I have. It's my first die cast. I've never been much of a memorabilia guy, but
You're never going to get one. You're never going to get one that's better. That's the
I mean, what are you
line
going to
now,
get that's
so.
better than that? So
Yeah.
I'll post a picture of it on social media here when we release the podcast. But Derek, thank you very much. That was very thoughtful, and I really appreciate it. The whole NASCAR community, I think, when it comes to supporting veterans and supporting our troops, is second to none when it comes to any professional sport. And for that, I know I am forever grateful. I know my mom and my dad and my sisters are as well. So just wanted to give you a little feel good story here before the best bet. But anyway, should we talk about that? The best bet?
Yeah, we can get into that. No, it's definitely a great story, and thankful that you and your family had the opportunity to experience that, albeit under, not optimal circumstances by any stretch of the imagination, and a great gesture from Derek, who is a linchpin of the NASCAR betting community out there for anybody that's betting, knowing the amount of content he's producing and how he's kind of opened the doors to everybody to have a forum and a voice to kind of speak about what they feel is most important from a gambling side. But best bet wise, definitely want to get your take in terms of what you think is the most actionable element. As always, want to remind our listeners, we do update the website on race day with a more liquid best bet that's typically a little bit larger position than what we can give out early in the week. Last week, and you talked about it, Josh Berry takes care of business against Chase Briscoe. We get there with a little bit of CLV on Denny Hamlin against William Byron in terms of our best bet that we gave out on the show. So the floor is yours, my friend, to keep this little winning streak headed in the right direction.
Well, and yeah, I think we want to kind of just talk this out because I think I'll just provide a little insight as to how we come up with our best bet. Right now, I do like Joey Logano, and I want to figure out a way to, how do we get him on the card? Is it that 12-1 price? Is it maybe a top 3 price, which we can pull up here, or is it maybe a matchup? And gosh, I plus 325 at Superbook on Joey Logano top 3. I think that's a pretty darn good price. I also like that win price. There's also a matchup that I like, and this is me talking out loud. These are not all best bets.
Well, our listeners right now, our listeners out there right now are going to fire all of these. Just
yeah, I know.
FYI.
And then I'm going to
look like a genius or a jackass.
Yeah. Well, and also from a matchup perspective, I do think that there's a little bit of an advantage on him over William Byron. I know that William Byron's had some success here, but that was back in 2021. Different car. Since then, he struggled. The other issue that I have with William Byron is he needed a damn good race in the fall to move on. It's not like he was just coasting through onto Phoenix. He needed a good race, and at certain points throughout this Martinsville race last year, he struggled, and he wasn't even in the Final Four. Now things played out differently. Blaney was able to wrestle the lead from Hamlin, and then he was able to kind of find his way into a comfortable position where he'd move on to Phoenix. But when it comes to those 3 things, Todd, when you're looking at matchups like this or a way to work a guy into a card, do you like more of an outright price? Do you like a top 3, or do you like a matchup?
I think, we haven't given out a ton of outright prices and stuff. So maybe we go down that particular avenue here. When we split that partial position with a top 3 and a outright that's there is also a matchup at a national book where you can bet Joey Logano as a slight dog to Kyle Larson at plus $1.20. I know it goes against the Werme NASCAR manifesto to ever bet against Kyle Larson, even if he was out there in a wheelbarrow. So I figured that never even factored into your calculation. So I think, the top 3 combined with the outright price for a little bit of protection there. I'd love to be able to talk top 5, but there aren't a ton of books that have top 5 prices hung on the 22 car yet this week.
Yeah, there's been a discussion of kind of this ladder bet where you take him to win top 5 and top 10, and you're kind of covered as long as they run well, and then you really get paid if you go for if they win. However, I'm not that guy. Is not typically my position. When you're betting these outrights, especially we've seen such heavy favorites come in the last few weeks, whether it's Larson at Vegas at 3.5 to 1, off to Phoenix at Bell at 5 to 1, then Denny at 5 to 1 at Bristol, and then Coda, you had 4 to 1 at Byron, and then Denny coming in as the highest payout at 7.5 to 1.
It's nuts.
These favorites have just done a great job of not making mistakes. Apparently the secret is out. Don't make a mistake and be there at the end, and you have a chance at winning the race. But I do like, let's just do some small positions on Logano to win at 12 to 1, and then a little bit of that top 3 price. Search around for that price a little bit. We were just looking at Superbook because I know that's the best 12. That's the best outright price. Maybe search around a little bit, see if you can get better than plus 325 on that top 3 price. But I like Logano, and there's something about having money on Logano where I'm like, yeah, I got a guy that is not going to put up with any shit. He might wreck half the field, but you know what? You got to get us paid. And that's why I like having money on Logano. I know my mom is a Logano fan. My stepmom is a Logano fan. I hear about it every week, how they want the 22 to win. And so I'm going to side with them this week, and we'll see what happens.
So we'll do that then. For those folks, when it comes to your position that you've been playing on the Stay Green actual podcast show, figure about an 80-20 split. 80% of your bet going to the top 3, 20% on that outright price at 12 to 1. So we are all Joey Logano fans. And as we've said, we'll be back on Sunday to offer up an additional best bet when we have a little bit more of a matchup offering widely available and some liquidity in the market. So Werme, thanks as always for your hard work. I can't wait to see how the racing unfolds this weekend at the Paperclip. I know that story that you told will be near and dear to a lot of our listeners. We peel back the curtain on a little bit of our personal lives and to know how NASCAR kind of brings us all together as a community as much as anything else. While it is a betting vehicle that we take seriously, sometimes there's a little bit more to the day-to-day with all of that. So want to wish all of you Stay Green listeners the best of luck this weekend from Martinsville. And with a couple of Joey Logano tickets in hand, we will see you at the window.